Exactly 50 years ago, something special started in Bowden, Alberta. Since then, the Alberta Conference Camp meeting has touched many lives. And this year, we'd like to go back to how it all began. With the very first theme we had at Foothills Camp. We invite you to the 2023 Alberta Conference Camp meeting. Come join us to celebrate 50 years of moving by His Spirit.
Good morning, everyone. Did you have a good rest last night? Yeah, I finally got getting used to my room, I think, and so I slept like a rock last night, so feel a lot better this morning. So, well, today we're going to be talking about movement, and the prayer, I thought, he's going to talk about moving and being moved and pushing and all that, so I thought that was pretty appropriate for this morning's topic. And I'm hoping, when I'm sharing each morning, that you come away with at least just one thing new that you can apply in your life, all right? I mean, I'm going to try to share a lot of different things, some new things that I've just learned myself. So I always am updating these PowerPoints, my talks. But I hope that you can at least learn one thing new during this talk and in each day's talk. If you're somebody who already knows everything I'm presenting, more power to you. But hopefully I'm sharing something that's going to be new to you that you can then actually apply into your life when you go back home. All right? So that's sort of my goal for each one of you here. And then, of course, like Pastor Jin said, share it with other people. You're going to get the PowerPoint, so if you want to share it, you can. And then in all my PowerPoints, I put my email address as well. So if you have a question about something on the slide, or you say, I forgot, what did you say by that, or what did you mean by that, feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to go and talk it over with you. I wanted to include some pictures. Since we're talking about movement today and exercise and physical activity, I was just really impressed with the 5K run that we did on Sunday. How many of you did that 5K walk or run? Okay, a few of you. So that means for the rest of you, these pictures will be new to you. So I was taking pictures. I'm a photographer, so I love to take pictures, and I was taking pictures during the event. So here we were getting ready to get started. There you go. So there we were at the turnaround point. I like this little girl on the Strider bike. I love Strider bikes because that's a great way. I wish we had that for my daughter when she was learning how to ride. But just was going around taking pictures all during the run. It was quite a good. I actually ran walk. I think I walked more than I ran, but it was a very nice scenic route. Got to see parts of the camp that I'd never seen before. So. Very beautiful campground here. So what I want to cover today, these are the three main things. I want to talk about how is exercise medicine. How many of you have heard that term before? Anybody heard that term before? Exercise is medicine? It's actually an initiative by the American College of American College of Sports Medicine, started about 2009. So I'm going to talk about how is exercise medicine, and then how do you take this medicine, right? We're always given prescriptions or over-the-counter things. So how do you take this medicine? And then finally, remember what I said earlier, is that there is a test that I would encourage each one of you to take either this week or when you get back home. And it's a test that will give you some really powerful information about what your risk is for getting sick or even dying. Okay, so we're going to go over that test. But before we do that, I want to start off with this question here. I always do this in all my talks. I want to take a poll. Which one is more important, nutrition or physical activity? So now if you think nutrition, and I'm not saying, if I don't eat, I'm going to die. Okay, that's obviously, we've got to eat. But I'm saying, which one would you say is more important, nutrition or physical activity? If you say nutrition, I want you to raise your hand. So, what? Oh, really? Usually a lot of people raise their hand on nutrition because we're always focused on nutrition. Most of our programs seem to focus on nutrition. So then are the rest of you raising your hand for physical activity? Oh, wow. I'm already preaching to the choir here. Are any of you sort of like in the middle and you're not sure? You're raising both hands up, right? All right, well, if I was talking to a general audience or a group of patients, let's say, I would say both are important. Obviously, both are important. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a different twist to the look of it and say that physical activity in a lot of ways is even a little bit more important than nutrition. And let me give you 2 examples why I'm saying that. Because coming from Loma Linda, people automatically assume, oh, he's a nutrition expert. Nutrition is a big thing from Loma Linda, et cetera, et cetera. We don't hear so much about physical activity from Loma Linda, right? You always hear about the vegetarian, lifestyle and all of this, but not so much about physical activity. So let me give you 2 examples why I'm a little bit more biased towards physical activity than nutrition, even though nutrition is very important. One is astronauts. We heard about Apollo 13, right? In the first night, Sunday night, astronauts and somebody in a coma. Okay. Now I can guarantee you, astronauts are getting the best nutrition NASA can give them. Right? They're not giving them junk food. They're not skimping on their nutrition. They're giving them the best supplements, the best phytochemicals, the best food, whatever they can give them, how they can give it to them in outer space. NASA is getting the best nutrition, right? Those astronauts. Same way with somebody in a coma. They're getting TPN. I know there's a lot of nurses and doctors here. They're getting the best nutrition that medicine can give them to keep them alive. And yet, what will happen to astronauts in outer space if they stay in outer space for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, if they were even to stay that long? What would happen to their bodies if they stay in outer space for too long? Atrophy, right. Atrophy. Their muscles will atrophy. Their bones will get weaker. Literally, their bodies will fall apart, right? Even though they're getting the best nutrition money can buy. And that's why we can't go to Mars. We can't go to they can't live in the International Space Station for too long, because if they know they do, when they get back to planet Earth, they're going to be a bag of mush, okay? So same with a coma person. When I was in high school, I was in Andrews Academy. I was working at the food service there at Berrien General Hospital, and I would have to deliver food to the patients. And I remember one patient, he was actually a young man there, about like in his 20s, maybe early 30s, and he was in a motorcycle accident. He was riding his motorcycle, dirt bike, in the country fields, and then he got clipped by a barbed wire fence. He didn't see the wire, got hit right here. Now, it didn't decapitate him, but it did cut his windpipe, and he lost oxygen in his brain just long enough that it caused some brain damage. So he wasn't a vegetable, but he could talk. I mean, he could move and things, but he couldn't speak. So anyway, and the rest of his body was healthy. So I remember feeding him and giving him food. But if you're in a coma and you're getting food pumped into your veins, for example, through your IV, what happens to your body though? Day after day after day, week after week, month after month, if you're in a coma state. Atrophy, right? Even if they have physical therapists coming and moving your arms for you, that kind of thing, your body is still going to fall apart. So what is that telling us? These guys are getting the best nutrition that medicine or NASA can provide them, and yet, even though they're getting the best nutrition, what's happening to the bodies? Falling apart. That tells us we were created for movement and activity. God created us to move, to be physically active. So yes, nutrition is important, and I think about nutrition and physical activity as two oars of a boat, right? All right? And I think Adventists, a lot of times, we focus on the nutrition oar and not so much on the physical activity oar. So what happens when you're rowing a boat and you're rowing with one oar harder than the other? You're going to go in circles, that's right. So you need to be rowing both oars equally. Does that make sense? So I like to promote physical activity because it doesn't seem like we promote it as much as we do nutrition. But just remember that if, even though you can get the best nutrition, if you're not moving, and I've seen this back in Loma Linda, I'll see people who are vegans, plant-based diets, but they don't exercise. Guess what happens to their body still? A lot slower than somebody in a coma or space, but their body is still going to be sort of just falling apart. And then they're complaining about this ache and this pain. So just remember, we have to be moving at whatever level we can. When my dad had a stroke, he started exercising more than he ever had in his life. Now, he couldn't do a whole lot. His right leg was sort of gimpy. His right arm didn't work that well, but we forced him. We made him exercise and move. I remember, I'll just say this because I don't have a picture of it here, but he came to California to live with us for a month. My sister's a physical therapist, so she was living with him, and she was making him do his exercises every day. And then 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, she would bring him to our gym, our university gym, our wellness center, the Drayson Center, and drop him off around lunchtime. And then I would get off work at lunch and go over there to the gym, and I would work him out in the gym, on the machines, right? I mean, there was one machine, for example, where he's sitting on the chair, and then he's using his legs to push on the plate, right? A leg press. And when he first started that first day, he couldn't even hold his right leg on the plate. It would just fall down. So I had to literally hold his foot against the plate, okay? And how much weight do you think I had on the plate for him to push against? 5 pounds? 1 pound? 0 pounds. He couldn't even hold his leg up there. So I said, oh man, we've got to start from 0. So I was actually helping him push the plate while his leg was there, right? By the end of a month, 3 times a week, he was leg pressing with his one leg. Oh, and by the way, when he first came to us, he was using a quad cane. So he was using a quad cane because he couldn't walk very well with his right leg. By the end of that month, 3 times a week doing that, he was leg pressing with his one bad leg 45 pounds, okay, by himself. How do you think that affected his walking? He was walking all over the place. Did he have to use his cane? No. So then he went back home to Michigan. This was before, if you're from Andrews, they have now their beautiful wellness center. They're called the Andreasen Center. And they didn't have that yet. So within a month, he couldn't do that exercise anymore with me whipping him and pushing him and my sister working on him. Within a month, guess what he had to start using again? His cane. He had lost all of that muscle that we had built up in that month, and he had lost it and was back to using his cane again. So we were created to move and be physically active. And if you don't move, if you don't use it, you lose it. So in space and in a coma, that's just accelerated. So all the nutrition in the world is not going to prevent muscle and bone atrophy and bone loss if you're not using it. Okay, so that's the message. So don't leave here today and say, oh, Dr. Medina said nutrition is not important. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is nutrition is important, but if you're not moving and using it at whatever level you can, you're going to still lose muscle and bone, even if you're the best plant-based vegan, no refined processed food ever. Your body's still going to fall apart. That's the way we were created. Okay. And if you don't agree with that, that's fine. Just wait a few years and we'll see what happens. But my dad's example was so, it was so dramatic in a month, and then another month. It was just very dramatic. So I try to practice what I preach. We homeschooled our daughter Summer from 1st grade through 10th grade, and so I started a homeschool mountain bike group. And so I'm now on my 3rd generation of kids that we do this every Friday morning. And then the other sport that I'm into is pickleball. I've mentioned that yesterday, playing pickleball. And so now I do that pretty regularly, and I also teach. And this was just last week. This was actually last Thursday. We were doing a kids pickleball camp, which was very hot. So we played outside in the morning for the first half hour, hour and a half. Then we went to the gym. But those are the main 2 activities that I do. I also have dogs, and when my dog Roxy was younger, we got her when she was 1 year old from the shelter. She was my mountain biking dog, so she would run out there on the trails with me. We ran out there pretty much every day. I was biking, she was running, and she knew the trails so well that if she was running ahead of me, I could say, Roxy, go on monkey puzzle. She'd run, and then turn on monkey puzzle. I mean, there's no signs or anything, and so but she knew the trails that well. So we did that for like probably 12, 13 years. Now she's now 16 years old, so this is what she does most of the day. And and we can only go for a little walk around the sidewalk very carefully, slowly. Her legs are sort of giving out a little bit, but she's 16, and so we know we're getting into that twilight of her life. This is our other dog, and unfortunately, June 25, we had to put him down. I was talking to somebody yesterday who was walking there during the International Food Fair. I don't know if she's here, but she had a Yorkie. She was walking her Yorkie around, and it just brought back memories of Davy. But we've had him for 15 years, since he was born. And this is the thing about Davy. He didn't like to go outside. Maybe because he was only 5 pounds, he was like this small. And so everything outside looked huge to him and scary to, I don't know. But this is literally when we first got him, we're like, why, most dogs, if you get the leash out, what do? Man, they're going like hyper. They're like, oh yeah, when I got my leash out for my dog, Roxy, her tail would be wagging and all this kind of thing. Davy, he would go hide. He'd go run and hide behind the couch or behind the bed. We had to block everything so he couldn't go back there. So he didn't like to go out. So my wife would literally have to pick him up, carry him, walk about a block from the house, and then put him down, and then he would walk. And I kid you not, they would do a 1-mile walk every morning and every evening. And literally, when they got to the halfway point and were coming back home, he would start to walk faster. Like he knew heading back home. So anyway, that's him. But like most people, this is where he would like to stay as far as activity. And there's my wife in the background. She runs on the treadmill as well now. But that's the thing that he liked to do, whereas my dog liked to go outside any chance that she got. So I wanted to ask a poll here: how many of you do at least 30 minutes? Now, don't count camp, because I know sometimes camp life and all is different, but in your general life at home, how many of you do at least 30 minutes, let's say 4 or 5 days a week, of some kind of exercise? Raise your hand. And say, wow, so I am preaching to the choir. Very good, very good. All right. So what are some of the things that you do? Just sort of yell it out. Like what kind of exercise do you do? Walking. I heard a lot of walking. Weights? Playing what? Tennis? Aquafit. Oh, very good. Anybody else? Swimming? Gardening. Yes, gardening. So yard work and gardening. Good. There's a lot of things. When we say exercise, we don't necessarily mean it has to be, that kind of exercise. It could be physical activity like gardening, weeding. When I was living in Michigan, man, we had to do a lot of weeding. We had a big garden and all that. So those are good. Now, what are some of the reasons why you exercise? Immune system, okay, health, sleep, helps you sleep better. Osteoporosis prevention, good. Mental health. Oh, you know what? Mental health, and we're going to talk more about that in the next day or so. That's probably one of the biggest things, especially since the pandemic, right? I've heard so many people say being physically active during the pandemic kept me sane, kept me mentally healthy. So that's a really big one, and that's a big one for me too. Stress management, physical activity, and stress management. So a lot of reasons. So I'm going to go quickly over some of the benefits of exercise and why exercise is medicine. And some of these you might know, some of them you might not know. But first, I want to say these two things here, insulin resistance and inflammation, are the two things that lead to most of our chronic lifestyle-related diseases, right? Diabetes, cancer, heart disease, stroke. Those things are usually impacted by either insulin resistance and or inflammation. So what you want to really think about is, what is it that causes me to have insulin resistance and inflammation? What are the activities? What are the foods? What are the things that I do that causes that? Because if you can answer that blue question mark, then you can reduce your chronic disease or protect yourself from chronic disease. Now, our current medical system, at least in the States, focuses on that bottom part, right? They focus on that. They treat the symptoms. They try to fix this. But they don't spend a lot of time, because in America anyway, at least, medicine there is not reimbursed for answering and addressing the blue question, right? They are reimbursed, and the doctors are paid if they treat the bottom part of that. But we really should be focused on the top part of that. And so that's why I'm involved in lifestyle medicine, because lifestyle medicine focuses on the blue question mark. Because if you can fix the blue question mark, then you're not going to have all that other stuff below it, right? But unfortunately, does your doctor get paid if he tells you to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables? Not usually. I mean, that you can't bill the insurance for that, right? So it's a little more difficult. I think maybe here in Canada with your system of healthcare, your doctors may be more incentivized to do that versus in America. They don't make money doing that. So it's a struggle for our lifestyle medicine docs. But when you look at what is driving the healthcare cost in America, over $3 trillion is spent on healthcare. Okay, on healthcare alone in the GDP. So $3 trillion, and these are the four biggies of the top part of the tree here. that are driving that cost. And if you look at what causes a lot of those things at the top there, look at the root causes: unhealthy eating, excess alcohol, physical inactivity, and tobacco use. Okay? So if we could address those four things, we could greatly reduce the cost of healthcare and the burden of disease in any country. And unfortunately, even other countries that were not considered westernized now, they copy America. I don't know, they don't copy all the good things. McDonald's has a mission to be within. They want to have a McDonald's within 5 miles of each other all across the world. That's their mission. So you could almost go anywhere in the world and find a McDonald's, okay? So they're spreading the not so desirable parts of America to the rest of the world. So those are the things that when I was working, with the exception of excess alcohol, I was focused on those other three things. I love working with smokers. In fact, I have a patient I have to call a Zoom this afternoon, this afternoon about smoking cessation. So I work with smoking cessation, of course, physical inactivity, and then nutrition, okay? Now, boosting your immunity. I know somebody said exercise is immunity. Yeah, definitely. Activity is one of the fundamental pillars to boost your immunity. This is from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, a great association that focuses on how we can try to get lifestyle medicine more accepted into the healthcare system. And then another thing as far as that goes is that this is Dr. Rady. He is the #1 researcher in brain health and exercise. So when we're talking about mental health and all, he is one of the leading researchers. I love reading his stuff. And so he talks about the impact of stress on the brain. Physically shrinks your brain. If you're under a lot of stress and you're not dealing with it, your brain is physically changing, and exercise can help to protect against that. And he was the one that came up or sort of made popular this protein called BDNF. Does anybody know? This is for bonus points. Anybody know what BDNF stands for? Ooh, very good. Give him an A. Yeah, very good. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And the molecule, you can see it up there. What does that mean? Well, if you know Miracle-Gro, do they still make Miracle-Gro? Okay, so Miracle-Gro is fertilizer, right? BDNF is like fertilizer for the brain. Okay, when you exercise, you release BDNF into the brain, and when you release BDNF in the brain, you actually make more brain cells, and you increase connections between brain cells. When I was in grad school, and I was taking anatomy and physiology, they taught us back then that the brain cells that we had were all we got. However many trillion brain cells we had, that's all we got. And but you have so many, we only use 10% of our brain, or so they thought back then. So you have a lot of extra brain cells. Well, now we know that's not true. We know we use all our brain, we just couldn't measure that. But we also now know we can grow new brain cells. And BDNF is one of those chemicals, proteins, that helps to grow new brain cells and increase connection. So every time I'm exercising, sometimes I'm thinking, oh yeah, good, I'm squirting BDNF into my brain, I'm squirting BDNF into my brain, I'm fertilizing my brain. So that's what that's what you want to keep thinking, is you want more BDNF in your brain. And when it comes to things like Alzheimer's and dementia, okay, these kinds of cognitive things, BDNF and exercise can help to protect you against these kind of degenerative long-term chronic diseases. Now look at this picture here. I like this picture because this is showing, and if it's I don't know if you can read it from there. Yeah, it looks pretty readable there. But if you look at all the different areas of the brain, all the areas, you can look at all the different types of exercise, not just walking or aerobic exercises down here. So you can see where aerobic exercise, what part of the brain that it impacts, the hippocampus, for example. But here's high-intensity interval training. Here is yoga. Here's lifting weights, strength training. Here are sports drills. So different types of activities and exercise can help impact different parts of the brain. So there's a wide variety of benefits to the brain from physical activity, and then also social connections preserve the brain. And somebody said yesterday they have their walking group, they have their baseball group. So those kind of social connections as part of a physical activity also help to benefit the brain. Now this is something I just got May 6, 2023 this year. And so again, since I'm in pickleball, anything that comes about health and pickleball catches me. And I like the title, The Surprising Brain Benefit of Pickleball from a Neurophysiologist. I said, yes, that's more evidence to show why pickleball is such a good physical activity to do. And Dr. Rady also said, he came up with 5 criteria. What is the best exercise for brain health? Okay, there's 5 criteria for an exercise. And so whatever exercise you are doing, I want you to think about, does my exercise check off all of these 5 criteria? So the first one is it outside? Is it in nature? Okay, outside in nature. That's the first one. Second criteria is, does it get your heart rate up? Okay, does it elevate your heart rate a little bit? Doesn't have to be super high, but does it elevate your heart rate? The third thing is, can you enjoy it with others? Okay, how are you doing so far with your exercises? Can you checking off so far? Okay. Fourth thing is does it make you use your brain when you are doing that activity? So for me, I'm into mountain biking, but if I ride a stationary bicycle, how much brain power do I need to use when I'm riding a stationary bicycle? Almost nothing, right? Because that's why it's very boring for me to ride a stationary bicycle. So I have to read, I have to watch something, because it's very boring. If I'm riding my mountain bike, is it okay for me to be daydreaming while I'm riding my mountain bike? No. Did you see that picture I had in the beginning with my dog, Roxy? There's that one trail. It drops 50 feet on either side. And if I'm distracted or not paying attention, and I go off that trail, you think I'm just going to stop? I'm going all the way down. And I've had friends who went all the way down, okay? So mountain biking, I have to use my brain, or else I could get seriously hurt. Stationary bike, oh man, I'm just bored to death, right? So that's why stationary bike may not fit this thing. It doesn't check off that box. And then guess what you think is the last box or criteria for something that's good for your brain health? What do you think? Here it is. It creates a healthy addiction, or it keeps you coming back to want to do that activity. That's why for me, running doesn't check that box off. Because when I start running, my first thought is, when is this over? When am I done? I kept asking, as we left the parking lot here at the 5K, I asked the first volunteer staff or something, are we almost done yet? I was talking to Troy here, and Troy's talking about doing ultra marathons, 150-kilometer runs. I would just give up now. But it doesn't create a healthy addiction. It's not for me. That's for me. Some of you might be avid runners, love running. My wife runs every day. But I don't. It's not something that I would want to do. I mean, it's like at the bottom of my list. If it's the last thing I have to do, then I'll do it. But I'd rather do something else. So when you look at these 5 criteria, you want to ask yourself, is the exercise that I'm doing, does it check off all 5 boxes? And if it does, then that's a really good exercise for your brain health. Okay, so for me, mountain biking checks off all those boxes, right? And then for me, also pickleball checks off all those boxes, right? So that's why those are the 2 exercises I like to do the most, because it's really good for brain health. Okay? I already talked about this a little bit in that other diagram, but this is just an article that just came out actually very recently in AARP, which is an organization in the U.S. for seniors, ARP. And so they talk about the strength training benefits besides just cardio. So look at the things that strength training does. Helps to reduce type 2 diabetes, which I'll actually talk about in a little bit here. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, increases your mood, reduces dementia, risk of dementia, and reduces falls. What do you think is one of the number one things that are a concern for people as we're getting older? Falls, yeah. Now, a lot of it happens, it doesn't mean, some of it is maybe in your ear and that kind of thing. My mom has a little bit of issue sometimes with Meniere's disease or Meniere's, so she'll sometimes get a little wobbly. But a lot of times the falls is just because you're losing muscle mass, and then all of a sudden you just get off balance and you fall, then you break a hip. So if you do the strength training, balancing, standing on one leg, that kind of thing, you can actually reduce your risk for falls. It doesn't, and there are like a lot of apps, and I've seen apps and programs online that are fall prevention with very simple exercise that you can do to reduce your falls, but it all falls under the category of strength training. Okay? Now, how many of you have heard this? This has been out for a while now, but how many of you heard that sitting was bad for you? What are you guys all doing right now? No, I'm just kidding. Well, I remember when the GC, I think it was the Indianapolis GC, I got the program, and from 7 in the morning to almost 9 o'clock at night, they had meetings and sessions and all this running. And so I sort of jokingly emailed the health director of GC, the health directors, and I said, man, there's a lot of sitting going on in the general conference session. did you know that's like smoking? You're like literally passing out cigarettes to all the members and he didn't like that too much, but I said, hey, that's not me saying that. That's the evidence saying it. Now, this is the lady, Nelfer Merchant, in a TED Talk 2013. She was the one that first said sitting is like smoking. That's where that came from. Sitting has become the smoking of our generation. This is back in 2013, 10 years ago, right? So it's been out there for a while. Now, she's a business lady, so we're like, well, what does she know? She's a businesswoman, she doesn't have a health background. But here is then a quote from a cardiologist from Mayo Clinic. Is that pretty credible? Cardiologist from Mayo Clinic? Sure. She said, for people who sit most of the day, the risk of heart attack is about the same as what? Smoking. So if you're sitting in meetings all day, you're sitting in a job all day, you're sitting reading your Bible all day, you're sitting doing good things all day. Remember, what did God create us to do? Move. But if you're sitting all day, look at that. Your risk is about the same as smoking. So is that shocking to you? I mean, it's like, so when I learned this about 2014, 2015, when I was going back to academia from my clinic job. So usually now in meetings, if I'm in a meeting, I'm usually in the back, but I'm usually standing in the back. If I'm at a conference, like I go to a conference and you're just in meetings all day, I don't sit in the front. I usually am standing in the back because I keep thinking about how sitting is like smoking. So if any of you start feeling like, oh, maybe you should just stand up and go to the sides, that's fine. At least you can do it for me. Yes. Oh, by all means, you can stand, you can walk around. When I teach a 3-hour class, I teach some classes for 3 hours. I'm always taking a break every hour. And here's the reason why. This was some studies some research from the Cancer Institute that came out and about this a little before this all sitting disease came out. And you see the different types of people there, right? You see Anne at the bottom. How much physical activity is she getting in the day? Nothing. Okay, pretty much sedentary all day. You look at Mike. Now, Mike, I was sort of like Mike. I would get my green box. That's my hour of physical activity. That green box, and I would do a little bit of physical activity around the day. But the rest of the day, I was sitting at my desk, sitting in the car, whatever. And look at the cancer risk. It's this right side here. The high risk is in the orange, the red. The blue is the low. Okay. So look at Mike. Where's his cancer risk indicator at? It's still in the middle. It's not, I'm getting my hour of exercise, and yet my cancer risk is still in the middle. It's like, what? How come that hour of exercise isn't protecting me from cancer? But now you look at Jim. Jim gets his hour of exercise in the green box, and throughout the day, he's physically active. Where's his cancer risk indicator? Way at the bottom here. That's where you want to be, right? So that's where you want to be. Now, Joe, I said Jim is Joe. Joe, I'm not talking about you have to be a UPS driver, or a delivery man where you're up and walking all day long. No, here's the beautiful thing about this is that you only have to do 1 to 2 minutes of physical activity breaks every hour to lower that cancer risk indicator. How many minutes did I say per hour? 1 to 2 minutes. You're not training to be a marathon runner or an ultra runner, just 1 to 2 minutes every hour. So that's why if you're sitting here in these meetings, hopefully, they end usually an hour or so, but you want to be getting up and moving every hour to reset those indicators and lower the cancer risk indicator as much as you can. Okay, does that make sense? So all you have to do, like he did, just stand up, walk around, move a little bit, and that's going to trigger that. So how hard is that to do? Is that hard? No, it's very easy. Okay, so if you're flying on the plane, it's a little harder, but if you're flying a plane, if you're doing a long flight, you definitely want to get up and move around on the plane as much as you can. Now, this was a little bit longer ago. This came out 2011, but I just found some stuff 2022, exact same thing, still supporting that same evidence. 1 to 5 minutes movement every hour, and in this one article, they even called it exercise snacks. I was sort of like, oh, that's, you shouldn't be eating a snack while you're exercising. That's what they're saying, right? Don't be eating something while you're exercising, but they're talking about these little bits of physical activity movements that you can do how often? every hour that will help to prevent and lower not just cancer, but all the other things in that tree: heart disease, diabetes, insulin resistance, inflammation. If you do that every hour, because again, we were created for movement. God created us for movement, okay? Now, how many of you have said this or heard this? And I've heard this a lot when I was working with patients. They would be seeing me for like obesity or weight loss, or they were diabetic, and they would just say, well, I've tried everything, but it's not working because it's genetic. So my parents are overweight, my grandparents are overweight, my aunt and uncles are all overweight, so it's genetic. So when somebody says it's genetic, what are they implying? That's right, there's nothing I can do. It's hardwired in me. There's nothing I can do. It's futile. Why should I even try? I mean, that's basically what they're saying, right? If it's genetic, how can I change genetics? Well, I'm here to tell you today that each one of you can be a geneticist, okay? You can be a clinical geneticist because each one of you can change and modify your genes. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so this is about epigenetics, if you've never heard what epigenetics is, but you can change your genes. So just to give you a little quick summary of that, this is your chromosome here. So on your chromosome, here's your DNA, right? DNA is your blueprint for every cell, every function in our body. Now, when you see the DNA, and this is a gene right here, this is a gene, right, that little red part there. When this DNA is closed like this, all bunched up together, that gene is turned off. Let's say I have the gene for type 2 diabetes. Do I need to go get a medical test to find that out? No. Because I said my dad was the youngest of 12 kids. All of them had type 2 diabetes. So do you think I have type 2 diabetes in my genetic? I'm pretty sure. I don't need to spend a lot of money to figure that out. I just look at my family history. So I know I have the gene for type 2 diabetes in there. But if it's like this, it's turned off, it's closed. But if it opens up like this on that right white box there, if it opens up like this, that gene is now turned on. Just like a light, right? The light is either on or off, okay? So now what turns it from this to this? What turns it from off to on? There's what we call these epigenetic factors, these different factors that will hit the light switch, so to speak, the gene switch, and turn it on. Okay, so what do you think some of those factors are? So again, that's the question. If you know what are those factors, what is that blue question mark at the top here that's going to turn on and off your good and your bad genes? I mean, you can turn off your good genes, and you don't want to do that, right? And you can turn on your bad genes. What are those factors? Well, look at all of these factors that turn on and off. I think most of these are looking at alternative medicine, social engineering, those are turning on the good genes and turning off the bad. But these are all the factors that can impact that genetic on and off switch, okay? And look at the bottom here. The bottom here is exercise. So if you are exercising, you are turning off your bad genes. If you are not exercising, you are turning on your bad genes. Does that make sense? If you're smoking, you are turning off your good genes and turning on your bad genes. If you are a loner and you don't have good social interactions, you are turning off your good genes and turning on your bad genes. Does that make sense? So they say it's up to 75, and I've seen something say as high as 85% of all of this, all of our behaviors impact our genetic profile. Okay? That leaves the other 10% or 20% to, it's not 100%, right? If I do all the right things, I was talking about this with somebody yesterday in the afternoon session. You could do everything perfectly and you could still get cancer, right? How many of us know people like that? They could do everything perfectly and still got cancer or heart disease or whatever. So it's not 100%, but I would rather take my chances on 80% than 10% or 20%, right? So you can change your genetics. So if you have a family history of heart disease, family history of diabetes, family history of hypertension, then you should be thinking about how can I turn off those genes for hypertension? How can I turn that gene off and keep it off as best I can? And these are some of the ways that you can do that, and exercise is a big way of doing that, okay? So you can't say, oh, it's just genetics anymore. Now, related to that is a thing called telomeres. I don't know, anybody know about telomeres or heard about telomeres? Anybody? No. One person. Okay. So telomeres. So this is, again, it's connected with your chromosomes, but this is actually at the very end. So if you see inside there, inside is where the DNA was that we were talking about, the genes. But this is the actual chromosome now housing the DNA. And at the end of the chromosomes are these little caps called these telomere caps. You can think of them like the ends of a shoelace. You know that little plastic end of the shoelace? Think of it like that. It's at the end of the shoelace. And here's what happens. Every time a cell divides and multiplies to make another cell, that DNA is like digitally copied and duplicated into both cells. So every time it duplicates, because we're always changing cells all the time, right? Skin cells, our cells are always changing and dying and growing and being born and all this. But every time it divides, that telomere gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. I think that once Adam and Eve sinned, God turned on the telomeres. This is why. Because as it gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, once that telomere is gone, once it's at the very end of the cell line, those cells have no more telomeres. Guess what? Those cells cannot divide anymore. That's it. That's the end of the road for that cell. So that's what aging is all about. So everybody's trying to figure out the fountain of youth. The key is, how can we make those telomeres stay longer? Okay? So I think that's why when Adam and Eve sinned, God turned on the telomeres. And back then, they were going really, they were living to like 900, 800 years. So their telomeres either were super long or they just got short very, very, very slowly. Now they get short a lot faster. And so that's what causes us to age, is this shortening of the telomeres. And guess what helps to keep the telomeres longer? What do you know? Exercise, that's right. If you are physically active, your telomeres get shorter, slower. So that means your cells can keep dividing longer than the person that is not exercising. That's why in the blue zones we talked about yesterday, physical activity was a key characteristics of all 5 blue zones. Whether they were exercising or just gardening and working in the fields or whatever, if you're physically active, your telomeres are going to be that much longer and stay longer. Okay? So little genetics there for you guys and all, and hopefully you can remember that BDNF and telomeres. Now, diabetes is another big thing that I really work a lot with, because diabetes is rampant in our country, and I think it's pretty high here in Canada as well. But exercise is a powerful way to deal with that. And I'm just going to put the 3 things here just for time's sake. There are 3 ways that exercise helps with diabetes. 1, if you eat a big meal and your blood sugars go up, which it's supposed to after a meal, the doors of your cells will open automatically if you go out for a walk, an easy walk, about 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes after you've eaten your meal and digested your food. It will open the doors even if you have insulin resistance there, where the insulin key cannot open that door right away. If you go out and walk or just do some kind of movement, the doors open up right away, the blood sugars can go down. So I tell all my patients, after a big meal especially, go out for a walk. Easy walk. You're not training for anything. Just move your big muscles to open up those doors, okay? That's number 1. That's like the immediate benefit of exercising as far as diabetes is concerned and insulin resistance. The second thing is, when you exercise on a regular basis, those keyholes that are clogged, those insulin keys are keyholes, because here's my key. This is insulin, and to open the cell door, it has to unlock the door to the cell to open the door so the sugar can go into the door, right? So it's not a problem in type 2. Somebody said you're type 1, right? So he doesn't make he doesn't make any keys or doesn't make keys, but most diabetics, 90% of diabetics in the US are type 2. They make plenty of keys, but for some reason, the key can't unlock the door. It's clogged. So when you exercise regularly, you unclog those keyholes over time, so then the insulin you have can now open those doors, okay? You reverse insulin resistance. And then number 3, if you are doing a certain kind of exercise, you are building brand new doors with nice, clean keyholes. What do you think that kind of exercise is called? When you're building brand new doors with brand new keyholes, what kind of exercise do you think does that? What's that? Walking? No. I mean, it'll help a little bit, but that's more opening the doors and cleaning the keyholes. But there's a different type of exercise that helps you to build new doors and new keyholes. What's that? High intensity? Not quite. That's still cardio. That's a little hint. What builds more rooms in your body? What's that? Anaerobic or strength training. If I build my muscles bigger, right? If I'm building my muscles bigger, I'm building brand new cells, brand new muscle cells, and they have brand new doors, brand new keyholes. So when you're lifting weights or doing push-ups or calisthenics, doing simple squats like this, and you're doing that. And then somebody yesterday even was asking me about that test I was going to talk about. He was talking about the chair test. If you can sit in a chair and then cross your arms and then stand up out of your chair without using your arms, that's a good indicator that you're in good health. Doing strength training builds new muscle cells, which are new doors and new keyholes. So that's another reason why exercise can help to reduce insulin resistance. So if you have insulin resistance or if you're metabolic syndrome, remember I talked about that yesterday? If you have metabolic syndrome, you definitely want to be exercising regularly, both aerobically, like walking or jogging, swimming, bicycling, whatever, and doing strength training, calisthenics, using the rubber bands, whatever you can do to build new doors, and that's the most powerful way to reduce insulin resistance, as well as changing your eating, of course. But that's the way that you can do that. Okay. Now, a lot of people are doing exercising because of weight, right? They're trying to lose weight, and some people say, well, it really doesn't work. Well, I'll tell you this: every study I've seen that talks about successful people who have lost weight and kept it off have to be exercising. How many of you have heard of gastric bypass surgery? When I was at the clinic, we had a support group for people who had the surgery but needed now to go through a support group. So, you take your stomach and you make it the size of an egg, right? That's a lot of the gastric, they make their stomach really small, so they don't eat a lot. So yeah, they lose weight, but there was a difference between those who had the gastric bypass surgery who did not exercise and just depended on their tiny stomach now versus those who had the surgery and started exercising. Those people looked healthy, they looked vibrant, they looked vigorous. Those who were just depending on their small stomach to lose the weight, but weren't exercising, guess what they looked like? Sickly, exactly. They looked like POWs. They were gaunt, they were frail, they had low energy. And they eventually gained the weight back. Even with their small stomach, you can regain the weight that you've lost, even if your stomach is the size of an egg. But the ones who exercised, as well as had their surgery, they were fit, they were active, they were energetic. So exercise is a key thing when you're trying to lose weight, whether it's the natural, healthier way. I mean, the surgery is pretty drastic. Or if you're doing it some other ways, you need to be exercising. And there's a lot more stuff I could share about, but that's just the key point. Now, we may be thinking we're just learning all this stuff recently, but I was really excited to find this in Ministry of Healing for Ellen G. White. 1905 is when she wrote this book. Look at what she said here. Action is a law of our being. The tendency of disuse is toward decay and death. Inactivity is a fruitful cause of disease. And then ministers, teachers, students, and other brain workers. What is she talking about? Neurologists? No, what is she talking about when she says brain workers? People who study too much? People who work in an office, use their brain. It's not physical labor like a farmer or something, but they're just thinking all the time. Brain workers often suffer from illness as a result of severe mental taxation, unrelieved by physical exercise. What these persons need is a more active life and would give power of endurance to all brain workers. Okay? And then this is my favorite quote of all. Those whose habits are sedentary should, when the weather permits, because she was writing this in Michigan, Battle Creek probably, when the weather permits, exercise in the open air every day, summer or winter. Walking is preferable to riding or driving. Such exercise would in many cases be better for health than... So here was Ellen G. White saying exercise is medicine over, 100 years ago, before the American College of Sports Medicine said exercise is medicine in 2009. She was saying it in 1905. Did she have an exercise physiology degree? Did she have a medical degree? A nursing degree? No, she had none of that. So this came from where? God degree. Yeah, that's right. She had a God degree. Yeah, she got this from God. This was not from her. So here she was telling us that we have to be active. It's better than medicine. I mean, I was just so excited to get this. So this was, we've had an advantage for over 100 years, and yet we need to be modeling this. And now current science is now just catching up to what we've known since the early 1900s. Isn't that exciting? So we have something that we can share to people and say, this is not new. We've known this all along. So, all right, so the bottom line is exercise is medicine. And, I'm going to go really faster because I'm keeping my eye on the clock here, because that's sort of like all the benefits and the whys that we should be exercising, what you want to share with people. So here is, and this is, by the way, this is my daughter. I'm a photographer, like I said. So when we were homeschooling, our daughter's physical activity program was swimming. So she was on a swim team, which is very good. What kind of exercise? Cardiovascular. And then she also was on ballet. That's very good for flexibility and strength. And then later on, she got into mountain biking as well. Actually, she started mountain biking when she was 5, but swimming was her main, and ballet were her main activity, exercise, her PE, while we were homeschooling. Okay? Now, always when I talk about exercise, I always want to be careful and want to stress safety first. Okay? So safety first. So this is some of my friends' kids. Summer's right there in the pile there. And I told them they should look like they're in pain, but they were all just laughing. So nobody was hurt in that picture. Anyway, but that was just a setup picture. But you want to be concerned about safety first. There are two things that you can think about in safety. The easiest thing is called the PAR-Q, and the second one is called the GXT. Now let me talk about the GXT first. If your doctor has said you need to get a test or you need to get checked out, they'll probably prescribe to you a graded exercise treadmill test. I actually have, not many people know this, but I actually have a heart condition. I have a thing called cardiomyopathy, and I don't know, does anybody know what that is or have that? So I have cardiomyopathy, and people say to me, how do you get cardiomyopathy? A good friend of mine, one of my best friends, he's a cardiologist when I used to work at the clinic, he was testing me, and he noticed that my ejection fraction, how much my heart pumps out, it was a little low. And the last time I got tested, before I left my clinic work to go back to the university, he tested me, because I got tested every year, and he was looking at the screen after I was done the test, and he was looking at the screen, and he goes, I said, uh-oh. When a doctor says that, that's not a good sign usually, right? So I said, oh, no, Thomas, what's going on? He goes, well, your ejection fraction is 30%. I said, oh, that sounds sort of low. And he goes, yeah, 20% we would be putting you on a transplant list. I'm like, what? How did I get so low? Now, to me, the only reason why I felt different was when I was mountain biking, the trails that I was going on, that I would go on that were in the past, and I've been riding for 30 years, the trails that I would ride on that were just like warm up and easy, I was getting out of breath. So I'm thinking, I'm just getting older, or this is a heavier bike, or, I was making excuses. I didn't think there was anything wrong with my heart. But then when he said that, and he said, yeah, you're only 30%, that means my heart was only pumping out 30% blood when it should be pumping out 80%. So my muscles were not getting enough fuel, glucose, and oxygen. So they were screaming bloody murder. So I said, 10% away from a transplant, what did I do to get that? And he looked at all my risk factors, and he says, everything is fine. I said, well, how did I get that? He goes, well, the only thing that we can think of is you had a viral attack in your heart muscles somewhere along the line. It damaged my heart, but because I was so physically active, the damage was much slower than a typical person. And where did I get this virus? Who knows? Maybe it was on a mission trip somewhere, got a virus, it got inside me, got my heart, damaged it, but I didn't even know. Didn't get sick or anything. So it is what it is. So every year, I have to get tested on a treadmill with electrodes and all this, do this test, and then he measures my heart to see how much is my heart pumping, and the last time I got checked, I'm now pumping at around 60%. So I went from 30% to 60%. So as long as I was going away from an open heart transplant, I was, I was just happy. And so every time I go in, I'm sort of nervous, like, oh no, what if it goes back down again or something? But anyway, so most of you won't have to do that. That's what I have to do because of my heart condition. And so during the pandemic, I was extra cautious. Because I thought, oh no, what if I get COVID and then I have this heart thing? But most of you don't have to do that, fortunately. But the PAR-Q is something that you can do. And I think this was actually even started here in Canada, but it's something that we use, a standard quiz questionnaire that we use at health fairs and seminars and all this. You can go online, find this PAR-Q, just Google it, and it says 7 questions. And if any of them are a yes, then that means you need to go check with your doctor before you should exercise. But if you all know, you don't need a doctor's clearance to exercise. You could go ahead and start. Okay, so look for that little quiz part Q. So when we're looking at physical activity, here is what I want you to think about when you think about exercise. Think of it as a three-legged stool. Actually, it should be four legs, but I couldn't find a picture with four legs. So you want to think about aerobic exercise, which means with oxygen. And then you want to think about anaerobic, which is without oxygen. And that's not, I don't mean to say you're doing strength training and holding your breath. That just means when it's anaerobic, it means the muscles are using a different fuel system, a different engine to function, versus aerobic engines need, it's like a four-cycle engine. It needs fuel, glucose, and oxygen. So when you're doing some kind of cardiovascular activity, that's aerobic. When you're doing anaerobic activity, that is like rocket fuel. It's just the fuel, no oxygen. Okay? So when you're doing this kind of thing, you're breathing, but your muscles are not needing oxygen to do the weightlifting. Okay? If you're sprinting really fast, that is too high of an energy intensity to use the four-cycle engine. You have to use rocket fuel. So that's why sprinting, even though you're running really fast, sprinting is an anaerobic exercise. Okay? But typically we think of anaerobic exercise as strength training, calisthenics, that kind of thing. And then the third leg is flexibility. Are you doing any kind of exercising that helps you to stretch, to be more flexible? And then the fourth one is actually geared more towards older people, towards seniors, is balance. Are you doing any kind of exercising that will help you focus on your balance? So if you're doing something like Tai Chi or something, you might be getting several of these legs at the same time, but that's why it's good to do a variety of exercising, okay? Now, when you do exercising, you want to think of this formula, FITT, fit, frequency, how many days a week are you exercising or doing that activity? Intensity, how hard are you exercising? Okay. T, how many minutes are you doing that exercise for? And T is type, what type of exercise are you doing? Okay. So when we talk about intensity, in cardiovascular, you want to think about doing moderate intensity. You know, you're not training for the Olympics. You're not training for any kind of competition. This is just for general health. So moderate intensity is all you need to do. Now, what is moderate intensity? There's many ways you can figure that out. You can use a heart rate monitor and all that. For most of my patients, that was too hard. That was too technical. So I would always ask my patient when I was seeing them, hey, when you're doing your walk, can you sing? And some of my patients would say, yo, man, I can't carry a tune if I had to. So they're, joking. But if you can sing while you are exercising, then you are at low intensity, okay? So if you can sing or hum while you're out walking, you're at low intensity. And that's fine if you want to do low intensity, but you want to really be more at moderate intensity to get a lot of those benefits in a shorter time. So moderate intensity means you can talk, but not sing, okay? Now, if you go a little faster, or you go a little more intense, you're sort of talking, but you're sort of a little bit catching your breath a little, you're at high intensity. And then if you're doing your activity and you're like, you're gasping for air, you're at very high intensity. You said high intensity interval training. I think you were the one. So that's where they go at all these different intensities throughout the walk. That's actually a good way to do it. But for most people, moderate intensity is okay. So you should be able to do what when you're at moderate intensity? Talk, but not sing. Very good. So if I hear anybody walking around the next few days and they're singing, I'm not going to tell you to pick up your pace. Now, here's the thing. Just because it's moderate for you doesn't mean it's moderate for everybody, right? I remember riding with a friend of ours, and she's very physically fit, but she was mountain biking with my wife and I for the first time. So we thought, okay, we're just going to go really slow because, mountain biking is hard. So we were riding, and she was huffing and puffing. I mean, I could hear her. And so we said, are we going too fast? I mean, for my wife and I, it was like easy. And we were in the beginning of the trail. This was before my heart conditioned. And then, so we stopped somewhere. And so, she stopped, she got off the bike, and then she threw up. She was really pushing herself hard to keep up with us. And here we were just barely pedaling because we thought, we'll go slow. For us, it was slow, low intensity. For her, it was very high intensity. So you cannot judge how fast somebody is going and that doesn't tell you speed. It's all different for everybody, okay? So you have to check it with yourself. If I can sing or talk or I'm out of breath, that's for you individually and not for everybody else around you. So just keep that in mind. Not everybody's at the same level, okay? Now, I try to look on your government website to see if there's any physical activity recommendations. I couldn't quite find it, but this was a good website. It had a lot of good information. I couldn't quite find it if it's the same as in the U.S., but in the U.S., this is the federal government's guidelines for all Americans or everybody just for general basic health, okay? Aerobic activity, 150 minutes per week, moderate intensity. Do you see the FITT in there? Or maybe not the last T, but you see the FIT? Frequency, intensity, and time. Now, you might be saying, it says 150 minutes per week. So what if I go walking on a Sunday for 2.5 hours, and then I did all my 150 minutes, moderate intensity, per week, right? Is that good? Is that okay to do? Well, it fulfills the letter of the law, right? But why is it not good? Well, why is it good to space it out? Yeah, exactly. You don't want to do it all in one lump sum. I mean, I use the analogy of brushing your teeth. Because people always ask me, well, how many days do I need to exercise? And what they're really asking me is, what is the least amount of days I should exercise and get the benefits, right? And so my usual standard answer to them is, well, how many days a week do you eat? Okay? Whatever days a week you eat is how many days you should exercise. That's sort of my tongue-in-cheek answer. But the reason why they said it here, 150 minutes per week, is because the literature, the research, did not specify if 3 days a week was the best, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 6 days. It didn't say that. They couldn't figure that out. There wasn't enough evidence. But what they did find was the dosage of 150 minutes per week was the key dosage to shoot for, and however you spread that out is ideal. Now, once a week, 150 minutes, that's not good because people get injured, right? Doing too much too soon in one shot, that's too much. So I typically say to people, 5 days a week of 30 minutes. 5 days a week of 30 minutes will get you 150 minutes per week. Okay, that's doable. That gives you a couple of days of I miss. Okay, so that's what I like to do there. All right, but if you want to do 3 days a week of 50 minutes, that's fine. However you want it, that's the goal. I had one patient who was nowhere near that level. So I said, okay, what can you do? She goes, well, I can do 2 minutes. I said, okay, just do 2 minutes. So she just did 2 minutes on her stationary bike at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner. 2, 2, 2. That's 6 minutes a day. That's it. That's what we started at. You got to start where you're at, right? So that's what I do. But that's the goal you want to shoot for is 150 minutes per week. Older adults, it's the same thing. Kids, 60 minutes a day. So if you have children, that's what they should be getting, 60 minutes of aerobic activity every day. That's why we went to swimming. That's why we did bicycling. We were doing something every day with our daughter, okay? So the goal is really do something. Try to do everything every day. But, if you can't break it down, 10-minute blocks is even good to do. Now, if you're using a pedometer or step count, that's another popular way of tracking it. And so the goal that you've probably heard is 10,000 steps a day, right? So that's a good goal, but that's a lot. But here's the thing, you can check yourself, and if you're at 5,000 steps a day, okay, 5,000 steps a day or less, you are considered sedentary, or you're considered a couch potato. So that's where all the different problems will come up. So your goal should be to be above 5,000 steps a day. Now here at camp, I'm sure we're getting at least that, if not more, because you're walking all over the place. So that's good, but when you go back home, if you find yourself sitting all day and you're getting only 2,000 steps a day or 3,000 steps a day, then you might think, how can I increase that to at least above 5,000 steps? Now, I found this was just last year, 2022. They broke it down a little bit. They said if you're 60 and over, instead of 10,000 steps a day, you can shoot for 6,000 to 8,000 steps, and that seems to be a good dose of steps per day if you're 60 years or older, okay? If you're under 60, 8 to 10,000 steps is still the recommended target to shoot for. All right, and then again, these were other studies that talked about those little snacks, 1 to 5 minutes exercise snacks. Now, remember, I wanted to make sure I covered that important test, right? What is that important health test that none of your doctors have ever given you? It's this right here. It's called VO2 max. How many of you ever heard that before? VO2 max. Anybody? Oh, wow, good. Some way in the back there. They look like they might be students or something. They look like they know this stuff. VO2 max. So what does that mean? Volume of oxygen your body can use at maximum. Okay, maximum amount of oxygen your body can use. That is the best predictor of how long you're going to live. Okay? So now how do you do this? So this is your homework assignment, whether you do it here at camp or whether you do it back home. Right? This is your homework assignment. I want you to find a place where you can walk 1 mile or 1.61 kilometers. Okay? So we got something measured here for the 5K, but you need to do only 1.6 kilometers. Okay? You find that and make sure it's flat. It shouldn't be hilly and hard to do. Flat is best. And then you want to time yourself. How fast can you walk that 1.6 kilometers? Okay? So you have to have a stopwatch and time yourself. The second thing is, at the very end, when you cross the 1.6 kilometer line, take your pulse. All right? Take your pulse for 1 minute, or you can do it for 30 seconds and multiply by 2, or 10 seconds and multiply by 6. But take your pulse. If you have a heart rate monitor watch, you can just look at your watch, right? Then it'll tell you your heart rate. But you need to know those two numbers, your time that it took you to walk. So this is walk, not run. You should not be jogging. You shouldn't, but you should be walking. You can power walk if you want, but walk as fast as you can, and then take your pulse. And I will say this, one thing, do not take your pulse using your carotid artery, okay? Why should you not take your pulse after exercising using your carotid artery? That's right, because if you push too hard, it could cause a signal to the brain that you're not getting enough blood, and it will cause you to faint and pass out. Why does your body do that if it thinks it's not getting enough blood to the brain? Why does it make you faint? Because if you're like this, and then you go like this, then the body's trying to get blood to the brain, and it's not fighting gravity anymore. So it's a sort of a self-protective mechanism to get blood to the brain. So don't take your pulse here on your neck if you're used to doing that. Take it on your radial pulse, right there by your thumb. There's a little soft spot between two tendons and the bone, and you'll feel your pulse. And after walking a 1.6 fast, you should feel your pulse pretty easily. So take your heart rate, take your time. Then you go to that website. You can use the website, or you can use the QR code there. And when you get there, and this is a picture of my students last quarter. I have them do this as part of their lab. They're all walking. I'm standing there, and I'm timing them and all this. But they were doing that test. And then when you go to that website, you will enter some data in, male, female, age, your weight. And then you will enter in, as you can see there, you'll enter in your time and your heart rate at the end of the walk. This is immediately at the end, okay? And then it will give you a result of your VO2 max. So here in this example, this person's VO2 max was 19.5. Now, what does that mean? It says they're very poor, but what does that mean? For this is a male, 56 to 65, so this is my age category. 19.5 was where? Way down here at the very bottom, very poor. So very poor category. And as you can see there, excellent is 36. Superior is 41. Olympic athletes are up in the 50 to 60, 70 range. Okay? So that's where the Olympic athletes are. They're up there. This person was 19.5. So what does that mean? His cardiorespiratory system is very, very poor, very, very weak. Okay? Now here's the thing, and this may shock you, but I'm going to really stress this to you guys. This is why this is so important to learn. VO2 max. I found this guy here, Mysteries of the Cigarette Chinese Marathon Runner. Who is Uncle Chen? He runs a marathon, 42.16 kilometers, at 3 hours, 28 minutes. Okay, that's a really good time for a marathon. And he's smoking. He smokes a pack while he's running the marathon. Okay? But his VO2 max is probably around 40, even though he's smoking. Here's a guy who's a couch potato. He doesn't exercise. His VO2 max is 20. Guess who is at more risk for having a heart attack and dying? The smoker or the couch potato? The couch potato, because if your VO2 max is 20, his is 40, even though he's doing a bad thing here, his risk is still lower than the sedentary non-smoker. And if you don't believe me, just email me. I can send you the studies that show this, but this is well documented. So whether it's smoking, whether it's your waist, your BMI, your weight, whether it's your blood pressure, whether it's your diabetes level, whether it's all these other things that we test, cholesterol level, all these other indicators, if your VO2 max is too low, you are at higher risk than somebody who has, a high BMI, but their VO2 max is very high also. Does that make sense? VO2 max is the strongest predictor of what your risk is for disease and death. So you can go home, or you do this later on today, do that test. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go through this here, but strength training, 2 days a week. These are some of my exercises. And some of the excuses, and again, you can get this all in the PowerPoint. These are the excuses I've heard over the years why people don't exercise. And I'll just say this. Which one of those is the number one exercise why people say they don't do it? Excuse. No time. That's right. So that's something, there's lots of ways to do a low cost. Somebody mentioned aqua, right? That's a great way to exercise. There's a lot of equipment you can do if it hurts. If you don't have time, the biggest thing I say with time is focus on the why. Why are you exercising? What is your ROI, return on investment? If I put in 30 minutes of doing this, what is it going to give me in the end? Okay? If you need somebody to exercise with, we have clubs out there. This is the one in Loma Linda. Dogs have been shown, if you have a dog, to increase physical activity. And here's the story about Hulda Crooks. I don't know if you know her, but she was a lady. She started exercising when she was older, in her 60s, because her husband passed away. Okay? But she became famous because Hulda Crooks, she climbed 98 mountains, including Mount Fuji, from 65 to 91 years old. And at age 63, she climbed Mount Whitney, which is the tallest mountain in the lower U.S., 23 times, and hiked all over. In fact, she became so famous that she had a mountain peak down in California named after her, Crooks Peak. And she died at like 102, I think, 103. And then we talked about the Blue Zones yesterday. So I'm not going to go over that. And I'll just end with this one here. This is a personal athlete. This is my mom, 85 years old. She retired at 83 from her practice. She plays golf. She plays pickleball. Here she won in the Nationals tournament, women's doubles at 80 plus. And then she also works out in the workroom on campus at Andrews University. She does her exercising there 3 days a week. And like I said yesterday, we just made a film last year. Hopefully it'll be coming out soon, but they showed her playing pickleball with Dan. So if it's boring, there's a lot of things you can do. There's my daughter when she was mountain biking. So your exercise prescription, frequency, 3 to 5 days a week, talk test, time, 30 minutes or so. Whatever exercise you want to do is good. Gardening, walking, swimming, pickleball. And then when you do your exercise, you should have a warm-up, conditioning. That's when you actually do the exercise, and then a cool down, then stretch afterwards. And on that note, I'm going to end on a couple of texts. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, purposes of peace and not evil, to give you a future and a hope. So I hope that as you think about planning your life, planning for more physical activity in your life, that you can think about these things and know that God created us to move. Thank you. And there's my contact, and if you need to get me a hold of me, you can. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our Father, just want to thank you for this day. Thank you for our wonderful creation, our bodies that you created, each one of us. You know each one of us. You know the numbers of hairs on our head, and you want us to all live full quality life to our fullest potential, and we were created to move. And so help each person here to find whatever plan that is. I know a lot of people here are already physically active, and that's great. But if you know people here who are struggling with that or don't know what to do, help them to find what will work for them and guide them and help us that we can spread this message of total health and wellness to those around us, because we know the world is suffering out there. So thank you for this, and thank you for the information that we received through your word and through Ellen G. White. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you very much. See you around.